Okay, so I'm going to talk to you today about value and about shading. Before I start, I want to talk to you about a couple tools. These are called tortillons. They are blending tools that will help you blend, and I will show you about those in a few minutes once we get there. And then these other new tools are called kneaded erasers. And they are not only kneaded erasers because they're fun to play with and stretchy, they actually serve a purpose. And what they do is instead of completely erasing something like these white erasers would do, if you don't have things that are too dark, they will lighten up what you already have. So if you have an area that's a little bit too dark that you just want to lighten but not really change or take completely away, or use your kneaded eraser. But the kneaded eraser also will get really dirty if you keep using it. So the reason they stretch is so that once they get dirty, when you stretch them, they are self-cleaning, and all of that graphite kind of just gets absorbed right into the eraser. Okay, so those are your tools, plus your regular pencils. You'll be shading more with these ebony pencils than you'll want to shade with the green ones. The green ones are those 2H pencils that have a nice hard lead in them, so they draw lightly. The ebony pencils draw really dark, but they also have a soft lead in them, so you can smooth out and blend together your shading a little bit more. As you advance in drawing, or if you are advanced in drawing, you want to work with only pencils and try to eliminate tortillons, but tortillons are a great tool to help you once you're first starting. Once you don't use tortillons, you can shade with both pencils, so that your lighter areas, you can use the harder lead pencils, and your darker areas, you can use the dark ones. And as you get even more advanced, they make pencils that are a whole bunch of different grades, but for our purposes now, we're just going to use these soft and hard pencils. So value, whenever we talk about value, value is what we call relative. What I mean by that is on your drawings, anytime you're doing a drawing off of a reference image, if you have an area of value that's super dark black like this here, these values kind of match each other, right? This value matches this value, which matches this value and this value on your photocopy. So on your actual drawing, this value should match this value, should match this value, and this value. Up here, these lighter gray areas kind of match with each other. So as you draw, you want those to match with each other. So the best way to shade is not necessarily, maybe not the best way. The way that I like to shade is by moving all over my paper. So these areas that are similar, I'm going to shade those at the same time so that they are similar on here as well as on here. What I like to do is start with my darkest areas first. It's a personal preference of mine, so that I know I don't have to guess how dark my value should be. I know for sure that this value is going to go completely black, and so is this one, and so is this one, and so is this one. If I start with those darker areas, it makes me less timid to push my dark values really dark, and then I'm able to keep my light values really light. What makes a realistic three-dimensional drawing is having those really black areas in your drawing and having those really light areas in your drawing, and sometimes even white, like in your really bright highlights. If you'll notice, these little tiny highlights here that are white are actually darker than these areas in the forehead. So you'll have shading over your whole drawing. But what makes this really three-dimensional is those dark areas, those light areas, but then a whole bunch of different grays tones in between. Basically what we're going to do when we shade these is make a whole series of those little miniature value scales like you just did on your pictures. So this darker gray is going to slowly fade into the lighter gray, and this medium gray is going to slowly fade into the lighter gray. So once I start here, I am just going to pick any of these dark areas. It doesn't really matter where. And I'm just going to lay this in, being careful in my eye to keep that catch light in there. And watch the shape of it. So I'm going to go ahead and lay this in black. As I'm shading, I also want to keep in mind that pencil control thing that I talked to you about. So you want your pencil lines to stay nice and close together so that you don't have a scratchy look to your drawing. The other way that you're going to make these drawings look realistic is by creating edges on your features instead of outlines on your features. So when you do these, I'm going to let this fade a little bit for now. If you look at her lips, you can see her lips, but there's not a really heavy cartoon outline on her lips. The way that you can see them is because the skin and that shadow under her lips is darker, which creates an edge. Up here, the actual lips are darker than the skin. So when you shade that in, it's going to create an edge. So the way that we get those is I can start with my line, but then I'm going to fade that line out and create a value out of it instead of just an outline. Up here, my lips are going to go darker than the actual skin. Sometimes I shade in kind of a cross-hatching motion. That's just my personal style. You should watch the direction that you shade into. If you can see direction within a drawing, if you shade or blend in that direction, it's going to create a more realistic looking drawing as well. Once I get down to the chin, I can start with a really dark outline because the shadow under her chin is black. So instead of leaving that big thick line, I'm going to use value and shading to turn that from a line into an edge. And when I look at my reference, her whole neck is a pretty dark gray, and it will fade from super black into just a dark gray. So I know my super black areas need to go up here. If I layer my pencils up, I can create a really nice dark black without the pencil getting super shiny. If I push really hard right away on these drawing pencils, they tend to be really, really, really shiny. So if you layer them up, keep your pencil lines nice and close together. Again, I see kind of a direction here. So I'm going to work at pulling that direction in across my drawing. And since we are doing half faces here, I have the added bonus of pulling this other side in and knowing whether my value is dark enough by matching it to what my photocopy is. So now I'll come in to my next darkest area around the eye. If I look really close at the eye, there's kind of a really dark outline around the iris, which there usually is, and then the middle of the iris is just turns into a nice dark gray. I have a really dark shadow up here where the crease is, so I'm going to put that in, and then it fades out slowly. So I have a decent amount of practice at shading and drawing. So as I'm working here, my pencil, I'm able to get the values that I need basically with just pencil and my pencil control, right? And you can start to see this is kind of slowly starting to pull away here. As you're starting, use these tortillons as blending tools for yourself. So I can come in here. When I use my tortillon, instead of just using it in the same direction that I shaded in, sometimes it's helpful to work in tiny little circles. If you work in little circles, that will help you to blend your pencils together a little bit more and get rid of any directional lines that you might have. The downfall of tortillons is that they will kind of deteriorate the quality of your drawing. If you use just pencils, you're going to have a more rich looking drawing. If you use the tortillons, it's not bad, they don't look horrible, it just takes some of the richness of those good nice pencil drawings away. Once you get your tortillons a little bit dirty, you can use those to actually shade up in these lighter areas if you need to a little bit. If you are working without tortillons, come with these light, hard gray pencils and they will help you to shade. So then I would just keep working, kind of move to my next darkest value. Sometimes what I like to do is lay in some of my darker value with my pencil. Again, being careful to really keep my pencil lines close together so that I don't have to get rid of the scratchy outlines of my drawing. Once I get almost a base value laid down, then you can come in with your tortillons and work to blend everything together and fade all of these darker values out. If you feel like areas are getting too dark, here's where you come in with your kneaded eraser and say, nope, that was too dark. So I'm just gonna lighten that value up just a little tiny bit and keep working back and forth with those tools. That should give you enough. Just remember, work within your values. Keep your pencil lines nice and close together. Value is relative, so everything should match up, and just keep working that way as you go.